So good evening. It's August 17th, 6:30 tonight for our SBC meeting. We'll call the meeting to order, 6:30 p.m. First order of business, present to speak. So if you do have anything to say, just unmute yourself, please, and say your name and whatever you'd like to share. And if you're not speaking, if you could just keep yourself on mute, but if you would like to speak, just take yourself off mute. Okay, hearing none. First, next item, Chairperson Report. I don't have anything to report tonight. We've got a few items on the agenda, so I'll just move on. Item 4, approval of meeting minutes. Unfortunately, our meeting minutes are still in process. We did have the recording secretary who was out on vacation and someone was filling in for her, and they just, we're just waiting on the last edits before those get published. So we'll keep those on the agenda for our next meeting, and hopefully those will be emailed to everybody so that we can vote on them at our next meeting. Next item, communications. I did receive a communication from the superintendent of schools, Phil Stevens, and he also forwarded that communication to all of the committee members. It's regarding the communication that was sent to the Office of School Construction Grants Review out of Hartford, otherwise known as the OSCGR for Ralph. If you guys haven't read that correspondence, it was emailed to you, I believe, this morning. So that is going to be discussed further down in the meeting. All right, let's jump to subcommittee reports. So we currently have 3 subcommittees: communications, land assessment, and finance. We'll start with our communications subcommittee. Any updates? And unmute.
Nothing new to report, but we are going to consolidate everything that we've done to date to share with the our community outreach group in preparation for that presentation.
Thank you. Land assessment subcommittee, any update?
Good evening. First, on the appraisal that we have contracted for today was the 3-week deadline. I reached out to the vendor this afternoon, haven't heard back from them yet.
Hey, Mike, just a quick question. Can we save that for the item F of old business and just
Sure.
Just give us an update on
Sure.
if you guys have a land assessment committee? Thank you.
The land assessment committee did 2 site walks on the same day. He started off at the Youngerman property, as it's known, which is comprised of 3 parcels on Ruby Road, also known as Route 320 North. These properties were bought by the taxpayers as a potential future school site. We've talked about it a lot throughout this process, and I felt it was very important that we actually put our eyes on the property. Although looking at documentation that was available already, it was clear this property was going to present challenges. I felt that it was necessary, if we as a group are telling the taxpayers that we're not using the land they bought to build a school, we have to be able to say we put our eyes on it and we verified why it's good or bad. And so we did that.
So Mike, can you just, for the rest of the public on the phone, can you just say when that property was purchased? And it is currently owned by the town, right?
Yes, I don't have the exact dates of the purchase, but the records that are available online go back to the 1980s.
Okay.
And so it's at least that long.
Okay. So this is just part of our committee's due diligence, right?
Yes. You know, myself as a taxpayer, I felt that if we bought land for a school and we need land for a school, we should be using it. And if we're not, we need to have a good reason why we're not. And so this helped to kind of put a pin in that. The site walks were technically a meeting, but there was no action taken by the subcommittee as far as any kind of decisions or recommendations. It was purely information gathering. We walked the site pretty carefully with Scott Pellman, and we observed conditions that confirmed concerns about the property. The minutes will be out to the public tomorrow through the town clerk, and so the public can see in bullet points what things we observed.
Okay.
And left that property, went to Hall Memorial School and did some more observations of that property as well. Considering things that again have already been discussed in meetings, but basically putting our eyes on them. Namely looking at sort of the borders of the property and what the challenges are as far as getting ourselves as close to the corners as possible to make the best use of the square footage that's available. And the other issue we've already talked about in meetings about elevations. Whereas the southmost portion is well below the playground. And so there's discussion about how we would make the best use of that section of the property. So that those two site walks on the same day were basically the action since the last full committee meeting. And the next thing we'll talk about later on in this meeting, which is the land appraisal.
Okay. Have you set up another future meeting for the land assessment committee?
No, part of that is looking at what we start receiving for information.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And the finance subcommittee.
Have not met.
Catherine?
Yes, Anne, go ahead.
May I ask a question of Peter?
Sure.
Peter, would it be possible, now that we're spending some money, would it be possible for maybe a once a month report about what we have spent and how we spent it? I know when we had our town meeting the other night, I think one of the concerns was that the people did not know how we had spent the money, and we weren't able to address that question, you know what I mean, in a list of here's how we spent the money. So would that be a possibility, do you think? Maybe you could work with Phil, or maybe even Phil, does that money go through Donna also? Yeah, or maybe even Peter, you could work with Donna.
Imagine that.
Absolutely not, right?
Fun.
I'll stick
that-
with Phil.
You'll work with-
I think it's a great idea.
I think she's making you cookies, isn't she?
Yeah,
I hope so. But that's a great idea, and I'll reach out to both Phil and possibly Donna if she lets me,
okay.
and just get a sense of our expenditures. I missed that last town meeting, and I apologize, but I did hear about it. And I
And
agree.
Perhaps
makes
perhaps we could start by going back to 100,000, and then on this date, we spent so much on this, and this date, we spent so much on this, so that we have a record that we could share with the townspeople when we go back again.
I completely agree, and we'll reach out to Phil and Donna, as well as my fellow members, Erica. And,
Excellent. Thank you, Peter.
Sure.
Thank you, Anne. And you know, I did put something rough together to keep track for myself and for the committee, but I can send you what I drafted up. It was really just a tool for me to just keep track of what POs we've purchased. I can send you what I did, Peter, and
Oh, thanks, Catherine. That would be a good starting point.
yeah, and you can
And
add to it, and just if you want to verify it with working with Phil and Donna, that would be great. But right now, the balance that I came up with was 30,200 is what we have left, which is why we went to the Board of Finance to ask for an additional 100,000.
And then we'll need, just judging by what I heard from the meeting, some sense of our anticipated expenditures for Scott,
Right.
and the environmental reviews, so
Yeah.
forth.
And that might
Okay.
be something, to Anne's point, that might be something that you could sort of tack on to part 2 of your report, monthly report. Here's where we're at, here's what we've spent, and here are the anticipated future costs.
Good idea.
Helpful. All right. Any other discussion on the subcommittees before we go on to the next item? All right, old business. Item 7A, owners, project manager, Collier's update. Scott, you have the floor.
Thank you, Catherine. Good evening, everyone. Scott Pellman, Collier's project leaders. So if you recall at the last meeting, Phil had presented the educational specification that was developed along with himself in the Board of Education. So what I did at that point is I took that education spec that also included 8,000 square feet for an auditorium and looked at applying that, or how that might be applied to the site, to the existing Hall Memorial School site. So I've got a couple of updated concepts and options to run through with you. The first being just an update of the original concept. One of the other things that the Board of Education felt strongly about was locker rooms for the existing school. Let me see, I've got to share my screen here. Share screen. Share.
And Scott, this is based on the estimated square footage because we're still in the process of doing our ed specs, correct?
This is based on the latest ed spec that was provided. I don't believe it is final. Phil, you can chime in on that, but the latest ed spec that was provided to Colliers, we've gone ahead, and again, we're doing this for budgeting purposes only. Even though you see hard defined squares on the plan, the architect and the engineers will be hired to design the building. We're just using blocks and masses to do a test fit of the area to see how this would work on the site. So again, this was the original concept. This concept at this point, and I'll get to a second iteration of this in a moment, but this one does not include an auditorium. But it does include the locker room addition and some additional square feet for one more classroom that was added to the educational specification. The overall option, we're calling this 1.1, has just over 1,700 square feet of demolition of the existing locker rooms. The reason that's been is proposed is those locker rooms stick out much further on this side of the building, and we're trying to facilitate the installation of a separate bus drop-off, parent drop-off lane. And so in order to actually make that work and maximize the on-site parking, we're taking off that 1,700 square feet. The ed spec addresses only a need for 800 square feet, no need for showers, some of the other things. So let's take off the bump there on the building that's affecting the layout, site layout inefficiencies, and put in an appropriate addition of locker rooms. So the remainder is just over 61,000 square feet of the existing building that would be renovated. We're adding just under 20,000 square feet of an academic addition, single story, the 800 square foot locker room that I just discussed, leaving us just shy of about 82,000 square feet. And then, as Mike alluded to, we did walk this site after the Youngerman site with the site selection committee, a site review committee, and just noted what we would need to do to get the required soccer, baseball, softball field. Again, the thought is that a lot of the dirt would get pushed to this side of the site to build this area up. This line here is the approximate location of where the grade starts to drop off. So this would require some significant fill, then maintaining an appropriate distance to the existing stream, adding, again, a new bus lane, as we've talked about in the past. And then the bus drop off, because this is tightened up, this would be one way. It would be two-way flow through main parking in the back, one-way through the parent drop off. And before I get to the next option, I just want to look at the schedule here with you. So this red line, this is for option 1.1. So it's a renovation option, single story building, does not include an auditorium at this point. Here's our current status where we're refining the options. Again, I understand, but we're going to have to coordinate this with the committee when potentially a referendum vote may take place. But this assumes that by the first of the year, we have the ability to hire an architect. We've got our town approval, and we start the design process. In order to really hit the ground running and maximize our schedule, in both instances, this is really the only area we have for effective additions in the project. This is the area also where your current septic system is. So what we're proposing, the engineers would need to look at is relocating, creating a new septic system underneath the ball fields. So the schedule now reflects an early development of an early site package during the design phase, getting that reviewed through zoning, DPH, engineering approvals, submit it to the state, bid it out. But we can't award anything until the state has approved your funding. Right now, if we get our grant application in by June of 23 of next year, which is the deadline, this red star, then the state takes approximately 1 year to get your project onto the priority list, submit it to the state legislation, have the legislation approve it, get up to the governor's office. And it's typically the beginning of July where a project gets approved, the funding is approved. So our thought is we get an early site package out to immediately start creating that new septic field, because until we have a new septic field, we can't start building our addition. So as soon as the funding is approved, we have the contracts, we bid it out, ready to go, we start that early site package. At the same time, we're completing the design reviews, submitting it to the state, bidding it. And once that early site package is well underway, we've got our new septic field up and running, then we can start the construction of the one-story addition. Again, it's a one-story addition. We're sort of looking at this right now as about a 14-month addition. That creates some swing space, some available classroom space. Again, we wouldn't bring the elementary school up to the middle school until the end of the project. So we'd use those elementary classrooms, temporarily fit them out for middle school use, and then start a very phased renovation. We're anticipating approximately 22 months with 2 active summers being larger areas, gymnasium, cafeteria, kitchen, spaces that you absolutely have to have during your normal operating periods. We hit those hard over the summers, and then a closeout period. So this is option, we're saying 1.1, which is single-story addition, no auditorium, and this would get students into the facility probably on the December to January break, going from 2027 to 2028.
Scott, can I just ask a quick question about, you
Yes.
mentioned the addition is offering some swing space. So how much is some? Is it 50%? Is it 20%?
No, the addition is about 19,000 square feet, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. I think it would have approximately 8 classrooms. So right now you've got 1, 2, 3. I believe it's 8 per floor on the academic wing here on the existing building. So it would allow you to start renovating, a floor of this wing, some of the areas here. It would also contain your administration area. It would contain media center, things that have to be accessible to your youngest students. So, those areas in the existing building, then renovations could start to be performed there as well.
I guess I should have framed it a little different. Will we still need offsite or another section of swing space in addition to what we would provide here with this addition, the addition?
I mean, at the concept level, it's a little more challenging to determine that of how big of a bite of the apple you'd be able to take, on the existing building. I think this anticipates an approach where you would just utilize the swing space created within the addition in the school. Again, these fields, the creation of your new septic fields, these fields are going to be under construction. You're going to push a lot of the existing material down, lower these fields a few feet, bring in quite a bit of fill here to start creating this level area. That's going to be part of that early site package. to get your septic field in. So you're really not going to have a chance to build any temporary facilities, nor would there be a lot of room. It's in from a logistics standpoint, potentially having portables on site, exterior from a security standpoint, again, not recommended. So I don't think we're anticipating that at this point.
Okay, thank you. If you want to jump to the next option, that'd be
Sure,
good.
Scott, could you just go back to the schedule for just a second?
absolutely.
Yeah, so because of the limited swing space, it looks like the schedule is being sort of dragged out a little bit. Is that a correct assumption?
That is a correct assumption. I mean, again, you've got to recall that you're not, as soon as the one-story addition is ready, you've got environmental conditions, you've got a 100-year-old building. You can't just go in. It's going to have to be a very measured approach. You can do all that work with students adjacent, in occupied areas of the school, but there are a lot of safeguards, protective measures need to be put up, temporary walls, air testing. A lot of things go into renovating a building where it's partially occupied.
Yeah. Yeah, not to mention segregating the construction activity entrance and deliveries from the parent-student drop-off area. All right, Mike, can we go on to the next option so we can? Okay.
Yes. So option 1.2, I'll just going to go through the basic up here and then I'll get down to it. Again, very similar from a site standpoint. We would demolish the existing locker rooms, which would allow us to facilitate that improved site circulation for buses, parent drop-off. We would demo the existing two-story classroom wing as part of this process. What that's going to do is that is going to afford us an area for an auditorium addition. But now with the potential loss of that space in those classrooms, what this proposes is a two-story addition, not a one-story addition.
Mm-hmm.
So we would, with the additional renovation, again, this is sort of a concept, again, not a final plan, just a concept, block concept of, but once we demolish this area, these are about 8,500 square feet per floor, about 17,000 square feet total. We'd be left with 44,311 of renovated area, which is in the lighter blue here. We'd have our new two-story academic addition, about 37,200 square feet. We add a little bit of extra square footage because you're going to have an extra elevator, you're going to have extra stairs, some vertical circulation. Our same 800 square foot locker room addition, and now an 8,000 square foot auditorium addition. So the total's a little, more than the last, certainly, option. But as you can see, that demoing out this area gives us, the opportunity to put an auditorium addition on.
And this is something that the Board of Education has also expressed as wanting as part of the ed specs, correct?
Correct. Now, certainly in this option as well, this could be, again, at the discretion of the Board of Ed, town, and this committee, this could be an alternate. So if you decided to bid this as an alternate, tear this portion of the building down, bid this as an alternate, this would allow that to be achieved. From a schedule standpoint, this changes things a little bit. Again, from where we are with the process, trying to get an architect under contract by the beginning of the year, all that holds true. The same early site development package, again, we can't start building that addition until we've relocated our septic field and created a brand new septic field. Similar, we get the project design, we get into the state, we bid out the remainder after we get our funding approval, and we start our construction, again, assuming 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 or 5 months in, we've got a septic field, new septic field that's active. Now we can start demolishing and start our new two-story addition. Because a two-story addition, we're saying that's going to take a bit longer. We're anticipating right now about 18 months for that. So create the two-story addition. Then abate and renovate the remaining school.
Move everybody over right?
But
Everybody.
what I would propose to do is, keeping more swing space, you keep the 2-story existing academic building active. So we move a lot of the people into all the new classrooms on the second floor here. We keep this area as swing space because now we're just renovating a much smaller area. So again, our thought process here is our renovation timeline, abatement and renovation. Again, we grab 2 summers, which is going to be critical. We're hoping that we can accommodate that within a 14-month period. So a little bit of a quicker period.
But it still would end up being 18 months of construction for the new addition plus 14 months of construction for abatement renovation.
Correct.
3 years.
And, right. And so once we're out summer of 2027, we say, okay, we're going to give up that swing space and we're going to demo that 2-story academic wing. So we start demoing that as soon as school's out in June, and then can start the construction of the auditorium, which would take us to the end of the summer of 2028. So a little bit of a different approach, a little larger addition, a little bit more demolition, but this one would allow us, some room on the site to get an auditorium constructed.
But it would also mean 4 years, almost 4 years of solid construction going on.
It's quite a long period again, and again, we're trying to jumpstart it with this early package, but
Right.
there's steps that we've got to go through. So we have to create that septic field. We
Yeah.
can't start building any additions till we have our new septic field up and running. So, that takes a period of time, then constructing the 2-story addition up through the summer. And then we dive really hard into the remaining building, build the auditorium. So for comparison purposes, then I have created a new construction schedule. And let me just go back really quickly. So draft schedule. So this schedule would anticipate that we could get into the building end of 27 into the 2028 school year. That's option 1 or 1.2 summer of 28 with this demolition and the completion of the auditorium. New construction, again, up to what we're going through right now, our current status, try and get an architect under contract by the beginning of the new year, start the design process. Again, we're keying in on that funding approval, getting things into the state. Again, design 16 months. We anticipate things like the septic field, which takes some permitting time, other things. It's going to take a little bit of time. Certainly we'll work with the architects, try and pull that back as best we can. But again, we're still anticipating a 16-month period because of some of the site logistics and septic field and permitting issues. Get the project bid, we start construction, somewhere going into the fall. Again, we may be able to do an early site package here. I didn't put that into this, but to grab this summer, I hadn't updated this schedule yet, but I think there's no reason we couldn't look at an early site package. Again, have it ready to go. So as soon as we get our funding approval, we grab this summer. That potentially is going to allow us to pull this back or give us a little float in this construction period. I don't see any way that you would have it constructed, by the December to January of 26, but certainly fall semester going into 26, absolutely the school could be ready. So you could see that, new construction affords us quite a reduction in overall time period, effect on the kids and getting the kids into a new school much earlier. But I will, for our next meeting, I will revise this. I apologize, I didn't do it, but absolutely, I think in this case as well, I would recommend an early site implementing package that we have bid out ready to go. So as soon as we get our funding approval, we hit the ground running with that package.
Great, thank you, Scott.
I think Dan's got a question.
Yeah, I would like to also just ask you if you could touch on the next steps, and then I'll jump to our committee members.
Well, the next steps, really my next steps is to refine the budgets for both of the renovation options and the new construction option. Again, I know Mike is going to address, the evaluation of the proposed site for a new school. Again, we're kind of waiting for some of that information as well as feedback from the site environmentals to help us make sure that we've got as accurate a number as we can have as far as comparing the three costs. So really, that's going to be our next steps. And I do think then once the ed spec has been finalized, final with the Board of Ed, I think it would be beneficial and prudent to set up a meeting with school facilities again and just review that ed spec. And hopefully at that time, review the cost estimates we have for the different options. There's a follow-up meeting to the meeting that we had a few weeks back.
And then after that, we can schedule our community.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got to get out to the community again. I think it's going to be, it's critical though that we have costs with these options. So the committee and the community knows not just timeline impacts to, students and everybody else, but what are the costs?
Right. All right, thank you. So Anne, I saw that you had your hand up. We can start with Anne.
Yes, Scott, I had two questions. Going back to the hall model, how much of the old building was retained?
In option one, just over 61,000 square feet. So that of course, the original 100-year-old building in the front, the two-story academic wing, and then the 1980s gymnasium classroom addition.
So you would, go ahead.
In option 1.2, it's just over 44,000 square feet. Again, the original has been directed by the committee, the original Hall Memorial School 100-year-old facility, which is in the front here, the gymnasium addition and those classrooms to the side. But we take down that stepped classroom addition in the front that was added on to the original Hall Memorial School.
But in Plan 1.1, we use that space. We keep that space, that classroom space.
We renovate these as classrooms.
Oh, renovate it. Okay.
Right. We renovate these as classrooms. It's only a one-story addition, less swing space. So we have a much longer time to renovate. Option two, we keep this as swing space all the way to the end and then tear it down and build the auditorium in its place.
Okay. My second question is for the new building. That did not include an auditorium, that design? Or it did?
Well, no, it absolutely will. Again, we're not doing a concept. I mean, we'll do a very quick concept sketch just to show how a building might be sited on the proposed site. That will include, per the direction of this committee, if so directed, that will include an auditorium. I think, again, the key thing to remember once we're able to share that concept is that this site is very, very tight. Room for future expansion really doesn't exist. So, one certain advantage along with timeline of building a new school is going to be future expandability of that school. If in fact the town sees some growth 20, 30 years, 40 years down in the future, you'll have the room to expand. This option is going to be very challenging with that.
One thing we talked about when working on the ed specs is if universal pre-K became mandated, then we may need more space for that. So we may want to somehow keep a little bit of space somewhere in case that happens.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a bit of more of a challenge on this concept. I mean, certainly if you tore this down and didn't build an auditorium, you would have some space here for a future addition. That is certainly also a possibility. But you can see you're really kind of maximizing it. Again, ultimately, you're going to need to hire engineers and an architect to design the facility to your ed spec. I'm just showing blocks of space that equate to the square footages.
Yeah.
But certainly, I think adding universal pre-K, because again, our most youngest sensitive students have to be on what we call the level of exit discharge. They have to be able to walk directly out to grade, out to the outside in the case of an emergency. So we can't put them on a second floor or a third floor. So our, so our at grade available space is limited.
Mhm.
So the more things we have to put at grade, it becomes more of a challenge.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else have comments about the update from Mr. Pellman? Mike?
Just a quick comment. Not to pick on Scott at all, but I want to make sure that we don't have a misunderstanding on that youngest level of exit discharge. The answer is more complicated than that. The youngest children do not have to be on the level of exit discharge. However, it's complicated because if they're not on the exit level of discharge, they need extra provisions provided, like stairway guarding to keep them from mixing with the larger population that could run over them on the stairs and things like that. So we can put them up in floors above the level of exit discharge, but then we may have to add extra stairways and all that, which will get expensive and suck up a lot of square footage.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Yeah, I appreciate the clarification. Yes, you have to provide dedicated stairs for those students. Now, certainly it can be done, but from a logistics and management standpoint, in the event of an emergency, if people that are confused and trying to exit the building quickly see a stair, my feeling is in that case they may run down that stair. So even though a stair might have signage dedicating it for our most youngest sensitive students, in practicality, would it be used that way? And again, that would be something that the committee would have to opine on, certainly along with their design professional, should you chose to go that route.
I agree. It would be complicated. It would probably require gates and separating up the traffic with some sort of barriers, maybe extra stairways, complicated and expensive.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not that it couldn't be achieved, but both complicated and expensive. And then from an actual physical application of it, a little bit of a challenge to manage as well.
All right, Peter?
One specific question to the concept and then general. Is it possible, or is there any consideration of restoring the original auditorium that now is partly the media center and then partly the cafeteria? Is that a consideration at all in terms of an auditorium in either one of the concept schemes?
There is not sufficient area for what the board is requesting as far as seating capacity and all for the auditorium. So that area is about maybe 2,500 to 3,000 square feet in total. It has a very small undersized stage, and seating capacity would be very limited. Also, its location would potentially make it a little bit more of a challenge where, entry exit points in this application could be, more designed onto grade. So, I think an 8,000 square foot new auditorium, this is being designed for approximately 425 seats, as well as a full-size stage to accommodate productions, music presentations, so forth. You would not be able to achieve the goal and the resulting uses from the proposed 8,000 square feet if you tried to renovate the one in here. And in the concept, I've put actually 3 classrooms into that space. So if you did renovate that for a very small auditorium, you would have to find additional square footage, new square footage to accommodate 3 additional classrooms.
Understood. My second question was again regarding the swing space, which I asked at the meeting before last, and I didn't quite understand it fully, but why can't we leverage our swing space at Center School? And if we did pursue a hall school site, new renovation combination, locate everybody at Center School, is that because of the dual schedules of the K through 3 versus the 4 through 8, or is it a physical limitation? And if it is, why couldn't we augment that with some temporary space?
I mean, I'm happy to answer, but Phil, I think it's probably more appropriate if you take this one.
Yeah, and I believe Phil already did answer the question, but Phil, why don't you, if you could kindly just refresh our memories.
Yeah, so right now there's no open classrooms at center school. Everything is used for classrooms. So you wouldn't be able to buy additional space by bringing students from hall to center to put them in. I guess you could put portables, the option of bringing portables into center. The challenge is the staffing is set up at the middle school for the middle school. So you would have to adjust your staffing and have them transfer up back and forth. And again, to Scott's point, it's a security issue, having the portables, and just you would lose the middle school model. That whole rotating classrooms would be very hard to do. And I think at most you'd probably pick up 3 classrooms, 3 portables, and you'd be looking at bringing the 5th grade. I'm not sure if that would really buy you too much, and at what cost. I think that's what the Board of Ed would question.
Does that answer your question, Peter?
Thank you.
Mike?
Just wanted to add a quick comment to Pete's question also on using the current auditorium, because I was really hoping for that as well, since it's already there. But using one of the standard modern building code calculations, the amount of area that entire room takes up is essentially equal to just what the code would require for the seating for the 425 students, and that would not provide any room that's being used right now by the stage area or by aisles that would be required. So seating, even if you use that space, the seating would probably be severely limited, maybe under 300.
Thank you, Mike. Any other comments from the committee? All right, Scott, thank you for putting that together again. Those are some concept plans that Scott shared with us. Option 1.1, 1.2 as renovation options, very high level suggestions, options, and then the new renovation, and as well as the concept schedules that you shared. So thank you for that. Let's move on. Next item, Community Outreach Task Group. We did have our first meeting, which I reported before. We are scheduled for our next meeting tomorrow, and hopefully we'll get some ideas and items in place so that we can roll out a presentation that we plan to put in, I believe, a YouTube format, and with information about, when this committee was created, what have we done so far, where we're at, and where we're heading. So that's the goal of the task group. Any other additions before I move on? Ralph or Mike, did you want to add to that? No? Okay. All right, next item, Hall Middle School deed and the legal opinion from Halloran Sage. As you know, we voted last meeting to authorize $600 for the services of Halloran Sage to prepare an opinion on the current Hall School deed, and they have done that. And I'm gonna, at this point, most of us have received the correspondence that Mr. Stevens had sent over, which includes the legal opinion. And I'll let Phil sort of walk us through that correspondence, and then we can have an open discussion about it.
Yep. So this was the request from OSCGR to have an opinion on the quitclaim deed. And so really the purpose of doing this, and I know there was additional questions after the fact, the purpose for OSCGR was really just to have a land use attorney review it and get their feedback, opinion on it, as part of the letter that was going out to OSCGR. And so that's what this has done. And if it's probably, I haven't seen an invoice yet, but it was expected to be close to $600 just to answer, to review that quitclaim deed. I did sneak in the question about the contents. And so in short, and just to keep it real simple, Halloran and Sage and the individual that did the review, he's done reviews like this before, has said that the deed is still legal, and that it does apply still. And so if we were to leave Hall School, that it would turn over to the Hall Foundation. He added in the content portion, and really to simplify what the content portion response was, is if it's attached, it would stay. If it's not attached, it wouldn't. So things like the furniture and things that would come out, but things like air conditioning units, heating, all those things, pipes, that would all stay. So I was comparing this to when you sell your house, and you empty the contents out, and the other things that stay. That's pretty much how I was comparing this. So the heating and cooling, the counters that are attached, things like that. But anything that was not attached, that would come out per his opinion. So he did, go into more detail, but I think the bottom line is, he's basically saying that the contract language is still valid, and that, he did provide some background as far as the contents of how that would work. So just a real snapshot there for you.
Again, I'm not sure if everybody had a chance to read the legal opinion. It was emailed to everybody. But if you do have questions, why don't we open the table to see if anyone has questions about the correspondence. Anne?
I think I know the answer, but Phil, the Prometheus boards, we unattach them and take them.
That's
Okay.
my assumption, and yes.
Yeah. Anything educational that way that's not built into the building.
Right. If it's, I don't know that you would take the wiring with you, but you would, they're just hanging there. So I think that's something that you would take with you.
Okay, thanks.
I can read the conclusion regarding the deed language, because he did, there's I think it's 3 pages of legal jargon, but in summary, his conclusion is, it says, therefore, assuming the Hall Foundation Incorporated exists for public, charitable, or religious purposes, the provisions in the deed to the town, which would purport to revest title in the grantor if the property is no longer used for school purposes, remain valid. So which essentially is, this is the opinion of them that we provided for the OSCGR's purpose. It may or may not answer everybody's questions that were asked after the fact. So I guess we could have a conversation about those specific questions that the members have made and asked if we need to go back to the attorney and say, hey, we still need answers for our own committee due diligence. And if you want, Phil, do you have those questions that I sent you? Because I have a hard time.
I don't have
sharing.
them pulled up. Let me see if I can find them.
If I share something on the screen, I'm afraid I'm gonna kick you guys out like I did last time. I don't know what's going on with it, but for some reason it won't let me share. Mike, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think that we could certainly find 100 questions worded of various different ways. And I think there may be an appropriate time later where we should do that. But the 2 principal areas the attorney addressed, I think, are the major areas for us. And one is, in modern legal language, is this clause still valid? They answered that yes, it is still valid.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that law changed and these things have an expiration date, in certain circumstances. This circumstance, it's still valid and it has no expiration date. That was an important answer for us. The other important answer is that they clarified that essentially the things that are loose and can be removed from the building that are educational equipment and all that, we should be able to remove from the building. I think those are really the key issues right now that we need to address, because all of the little subtleties of what we might do with the Hall Foundation can't be answered now anyway, unless we have a negotiation with the Hall Foundation and present new legal options. And I think they're amenable to conversation if that is needed. So right now we've established the clause is valid and we can take our furnishings and loose items from the building. Everything else is subject to negotiation, in my mind anyway.
Thank you, Mike. Phil?
Yeah, and I think that was the purpose of this. I think that's what OSCGR was really looking for. They want the opinion to know if they're gonna, they're gonna read that quitclaim deed themselves and determine if they want to fund the project. If it were an HMS, renovation, will they fund the project with the way the deed is? And they may say, no, thank you. Please review the deed, revise the deed. And in which case, we would need to vote for more legal money and talk to the Hall Foundation to make revisions to, meet the requirement for OSCGR if it was going to be a renovation of Hall School. I think that's what some of those questions are about. Not as much about, really, we did this to meet the request of OSCGR. They wanted this. We gave them the information, and now it's let's see what they come back with. If they say we're okay with it the way it is, then why would you spend more funds on legal questions that with the deed that they're okay with?
Thank you, Phil. And I'm just going to read one of the questions that was asked to the OSCGR from the superintendent, which is basically, how would the state recommend the school building committee proceed if the Hall Foundation is willing to adjust the quitclaim of the deed? What components of the deed would the state require to ensure Willington was eligible for a renovation project grant? And I think I missed a question. Yeah, so basically we're asking them if, with the current deed that we have, are they going to fund our project if we do a renovation at Hall? That's really the question, because we can't, at this point, we have what we have and we're trying to do the due diligence to figure out what they're going to support. So at this point, I think this was just sent today or yesterday. Was it sent to them? It was sent to them yesterday. And we're just waiting for a response from OSCGR. So we can put that on our agenda for our next meeting with hopes that they will have a response for us. If not, we'll just, we'll just wait until they respond. All right, any other questions or comments about the Hall Middle School deed and the legal opinion from Halloran Sage? And based on what Mike was just stating, is that those questions are probably valid at a different stage in the project. Is that a correct assumption, Mike, that the questions that were asked, we can hold on to them until we're ready to take the next step if we need to with legal?
Well, I don't think it's my right to decide that as much as that's what my feeling is. That
No, I just
answered the
trying to
key.
summarize. what you
Right.
were saying.
Yeah, I would agree with you. We've answered the key questions for this stage. And we may have some very good questions and some things to ask as we move further along. Once we get a reaction from OSCGR, that will kind of point us in a direction of what we need to research next, or if we need to research something next. And then essentially the sky's the limit of what we might negotiate in a new agreement if we go that route.
Okay. Scott, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to again, it's a stepping process, but if we get past this hurdle, or the state says, yes, we would fund a project at Hall Memorial Site, we would still need to submit a renovation status package, which is quite detailed. You'd have to hire an architect to get that done. and then we have to prove to them that there's a cost savings associated with renovation versus building new. So again, this is a step-by-step. There's milestones here where we could hit a stopping point. We're not there yet, but this is certainly one of those early ones we need a decision on.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to move on to the next item if there's no other comments about the deed. So it's item D, 7D, Phase 1 Site Environmental Analysis.
I can probably provide an update for that. The environmental engineers hit the ground running. They've visited both sites. They're very close to having their reports complete. There is one issue that's delaying a little bit of that completion. It's not a situation of their making. So we're hoping to have those reports prior to the next building committee meeting. But they have been out to the sites. They have issued, the district has responded to the questionnaires. So I think we're pretty close. But again, hopefully by the next meeting, we will have results of their findings.
Okay, thank you. So we'll keep that on the agenda as well. Next item, E, request for funding update.
I mean, I guess I can speak to that because I was in person there answering questions, but so I don't have the specifics of next steps. I think Erica was looking into that. But the money at town meeting did not pass. I think it was by 4 votes. And so now the money is still in the budget. People are still taxed on it. It's just a matter of if there's another request that would go back to, I believe it would go to Board of Finance again, but I'm not sure. And that's what I would have to ask Erica about. It would go to Board of Finance and then back to town meeting. But from what I understand is that can happen. And maybe that needs to happen closer to when the current, the balance that we currently have in the $100,000 from the first year is maybe a little more depleted. But that's my 2 cents. I don't know that there was and I'm going to be honest, I don't know there was a lot of questions about the money. There was some questions about how the current money's been spent. There was probably more comments about just a lack of support for the project from the folks that were vocal in the room.
Thank you, Phil. So next steps on that, we're waiting to hear from the Board of Selectmen to give us direction on next steps. Mike?
As our Board of Finance representative, I would agree with what Phil just said. It would have to go back through. And since I'm on, not only on this committee, but on the task group for the summary video update communication thing, I think we probably have an opportunity here to read the tea leaves from what people said at that meeting. And we can combine a few different efforts to maybe put us in a better spot for the next time. And if we've got our communication video out to the public, there may be more support because people understand where we are and how the process is working. We also have the opportunity for our finance subgroup that we talked about to create a regular reporting. And also in the time we will have used up some more of this $100,000. So I think there might be 3 or 4 things that will come together over the next couple of months that may put us in a position to find more support.
Thank you, Mike. Any other comments on this item? All right, let's move on to item F, 7F, appraisal for a potential school site. I'm not sure we have a update. Mike, why don't you go? You look like you're
Very minimal update. The appraiser had given us a price and a timeline and politely said, that's where we are. I'm sorry, I can't deviate from that. We agreed, we paid it, and I checked back through to see what date he had confirmed they had initiated work. Today would be the 3-week mark. So this afternoon I sent an email saying we're at 3 weeks. I'm looking for an update on the report, but that was fairly late in the day that I sent that, and I have not gotten a response yet. I'm assuming tomorrow they'll respond. They've been very responsive and very good to work with. So I'm hoping he'll keep to his word and we'll have a report tomorrow, because that'll be 3 weeks and a day.
What day was he out there? Do you know?
I don't have it,
3 weeks from today, right?
but it
3 weeks
was
before.
the work on the site was done, I think 8 days, wait a second, no, 9 days ago.
Okay. All right, we'll keep it on the agenda for our next meeting with hopes that we have a report to share with the committee. So item 8, new business. Do we have any? I don't believe we have any new business for tonight. 9, future business items for future agenda.
Catherine, I think sorry, Peter, I think we're close to several things here within the next 3, 4, 5 weeks. I was making notes about next comments. So we'll have both sets of minutes that were kind of passed over tonight. We'll have the land committee meeting minutes. We should have meeting minutes from is the YouTube group posting?
No, I think because this was a task group, we just gave an update. Like when we did the RFP for the owners PM, we didn't do any minutes for that. We just did an update at our.
Just asking. So I won't put that on there. Hopefully we'll have a response from OSCGR. That may be on there because it's 3 weeks from today.
Yeah.
Phase 1 site analysis and the appraisal may be coming in. So I mean, we have some big things that may be occurring in the next 3 or 4 weeks. And all of those things would be on my list here as far as what I would see on the next agenda.
Okay. Yeah, I've got those highlighted, so. Okay, anybody have anything else to add for future agenda items? If not, we can, oh, Peter? Hold on, Peter. Gotta unmute yourself. Can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. For some reason, it wasn't appearing at the bottom of my browser thing. I guess I wanted to ask, with everything kind of popping, like Phil said, with the environmental studies coming in, we have the detailed concept plan of Hall, possibly the evaluation of the land coming in soon. Would it be possible to get the final ed spec that Scott was referencing tonight? I know we had an outline from Phil, and I took a lot of notes, but will we have that like as a document we could look at, so as we're understanding all of this stuff, we can refer to it?
Sorry, I meant to mention that. So I'm in the process of getting ready to send the board the complete draft. I went through at the last meeting with them, kind of step by step of what's in each section. I have a couple questions I need confirmed with Scott, but I can easily send it out. It's still a draft. It's not finalized for the Board of Ed, but they made some pretty solid progress on it once they saw the format of what it looks like. And so, you know, the only thing that would change for you for this committee really would be if there's any changes in square footage. There's a couple minor things I have to ask Scott about, but at this point, I don't anticipate that. So it's coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Peter. Anybody else? Okay, let's move on to present to speak. So again, if you would like to say something, just unmute yourself and state your name and and what you'd like to share.
It's Nick Teller, 49 Merrill. Hey, just two things. So first thing is, I guess this land on Ruby Road. If we can't be using this for any school development or anything, has there been consideration to sell it and use some of those funds to either put towards repairs or even in the new rebuild? My second thing here that I have is, just, yeah, I know you're going to ask for money again, and from my perspective and others that I've been talking to, and I've said this, I don't know, 3-4 times probably, there's been no consideration, it seems, and other people, the perception is there's been no consideration of trying to save Hall and Center. It's all in on Hall and that's it. So you're asking for more money, but yet there's no long-term cost comparison that at least I've seen or others I've talked to have seen about saving center school also. That's it. Thanks.
Nick. Anybody else present to speak? All right, one more time, present to speak.
Kevin,
Hang on, Mike. Just give it another couple seconds. If you do want to speak, please just unmute yourself. Okay, Mike, go ahead.
since it is not appropriate to engage public in present to speak, I think it would be important for us, and I think I saw Phil taking notes. I think it'd be important for us to keep track of some of these questions like Nick just presented so that we can make sure to address them in the future and or in our public communications and things like that, because it would be good. There may be clarifications needed. There may be answers already available that we can give people.
Right. And that might be a good one to put on our FAQs document, because I'm sure Nick's not the only one that has that same question.
Also
Right.
for public presentations.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Just give it one more second for public to speak. And then we'll, if there's hearing no one, thank you all for coming, and like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So
It's
moved.
7:37. Still moved by Ralph, and a second for Mike. You guys have a great week, and we'll see you on September 7th. Thank you all.
Aye.
Good
Oh,
night.
sorry, aye. The meeting adjourned.